Hey, I'm Andrew with 10-Minute Therapy, and today we're going to continue our look at cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, by examining what I believe might be one of the most important topics we discuss: cognitive distortions, a topic that I believe applies to all of us and therefore is worthy of our time and attention today. So, without further ado, let's start the timer. We'll get right to it. So, what are cognitive distortions? Well, we began last time by looking at cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, as a form of counseling that's just effective and helpful for all of us because it really has to do with correcting our thinking. And so in today's video, examining cognitive distortions becomes so important because cognitive distortions are not a diagnosis. Cognitive distortions are not something that are only attributed to people with certain mental health disorders. Cognitive distortions, as their name implies, are errors in our thinking. A better way to look at this might be faulty thinking. And the reality is, all of us as human beings engage in faulty thinking at one time or another. And so I love teaching on this topic because it is so imperative, it is so helpful for all of us as human beings, whether I have a clean bill of health or whether I'm someone that wrestles with a particular mental health disorder. We're all guilty of engaging in faulty thinking from time to time. The question is really not if, but what kind of faulty thinking. And so before we go into some examples today, I want to start with really kind of giving a good, healthy understanding that cognitive distortions, as I said, are not related to a particular mental health disorder. They are not criteria for a mental health disorder. They're just something we wrestle with as human beings. And so I like to give this analogy when discussing cognitive distortions. So I want you to imagine that you have a camera and you like to use this camera to take beautiful pictures of landscapes and things that really capture the beauty of the world around you. But I want you to imagine that you've accidentally dropped this camera, and now this camera develops a crack, a jagged crack right across the lens of the camera. Fortunately, the camera still works. All of its internal components are working optimally, and it still functions beautifully. But you have this big jagged crack right across the lens of the camera. So the issue is, now the camera still works. You can still take pictures with the camera. You can capture beautiful landscapes, but every picture you take is now going to inherently have this jagged crack right through the picture, which means that the pictures you take are no longer representative of the beauty of the reality around you. Instead, they come into you distorted by this crack. And worse yet, if this crack stays and you continue to leave it rather than fix it and continue to take pictures, now the jagged crack in the camera allows water and dirt and debris to make its way into the lens, which further blurs and distorts the images that you are taking. So now these images no longer represent reality, they are distorted. And in the same way, this is what cognitive distortions do to us. They are like a crack in the lens of your mind. It doesn't mean your brain is broken. It doesn't mean your mind is broken. It simply means that our perspective is skewed. There's a crack, there's a distortion, there's something affecting my perspective of reality. So the reality around me isn't necessarily changing, but my perception of it is being affected and distorted by a cognitive distortion, a faulty thinking error. And so what we want to do is really just expose some of these thinking errors. We want to expose them. We want to have awareness of them. We want to see them for what they are. And so for the remainder of this video and into our next video, we're actually going to look at different examples of cognitive distortions, different examples of thinking errors that you and I fall into. And so I thought we would start in today's video with examining what I believe are probably some of the more common thinking errors that we fall into. And I'm going to loop these under an umbrella term that we call predictive thinking. You and I, as human beings, do this thing that I like to call predictive thinking, as if we can predict things that we can't really know, what's going to happen next, what people are thinking, etc. Predictive thinking. And we engage in this thinking. Interestingly, as human beings, we have an ability that no other creature has. And that is to say, we can imagine things in our minds and we can experience emotional responses to the things that we are imagining. Now, this works out wonderfully when it's a very positive thing. When I'm daydreaming and I think, man, imagine I get that promotion at work. Oh, how good is that going to feel that all that hard work paid off? And we feel a little bit of joy, a little bit of pleasure. We have a little bit of dopamine response in the brain. Or I think, man, how great is life going to be when I accomplish this goal and our family gets to hear, or we get that house that we've really wanted that gives us the space to enjoy life, and we get to experience joy with that. But this same process of thinking actually works against us when the thinking is very negative, and cognitive distortions typically fall in that very negative loop of thinking. So for today's video, let's look at 3 examples of predictive thinking that often work against us. The first, and arguably the most common cognitive distortion that I know, is what if thinking. What if thinking. Now, this one probably doesn't need an introduction. I don't need to go into great depth because the truth is all of us have engaged in what if thinking at one time or another. Quite simply, it's the place where we say, what if this happens? What if this happens? And we start to imagine and then experience the response to those what if thinkings. But this is not typically daydreaming. What if this great thing happens? It's usually very negative, right? What if my boss fires me? What if I can't pay the bills? What if I can't put food on the table? What if my spouse leaves me? What if my kids get sick and I don't have the money to take them to the hospital? What if, what if, what if, what if? And there's several major issues with what if thinking. First and foremost, as you heard as I was just sort of rattling off that example, what if thinking is a spiral, right? In other words, rarely do we just think what if one little thing. We tend to think what if this, and then that, and then that, and then that, and then that. And it takes us down this spiral loop. And that spiral loop is dangerous for 2 reasons. Number one, what if thinking is so dangerous because it's not real. We are imagining negative events that aren't really happening. We're imagining worst case scenario outcomes that aren't really there. And number 2, what if thinking is so dangerous because it is a spiral, meaning there are an infinite number of what if thoughts that I can fall into. There are an infinite number of negative outcomes that I can imagine. And so when we engage in what if thinking, not only are we sitting in something that's not real, it's not representative of reality, but I can also sit in that place and just continue to get sucked into this void of endless negative looped thinking. Another form of predictive thinking, besides the what if thinking, takes the place of what we might call mind reading, and another one that we call jumping to conclusions. Mind reading, as its name implies, is this thing we do where we almost imagine that we have the ability to read someone else's mind. Now, logically, we know that's not true. We know I can't really read someone else's mind. I don't actually know what someone else is thinking. But I want you to go back to, say, junior high or high school if you're an adult. If you're already a teenager, then just imagine you're walking into the cafeteria. And this thought comes across your mind as you scan across the room and you're looking for where to sit. You suddenly find yourself thinking, oh man, that group over there at the table glanced my way. I bet they're judging me. I bet they don't like the way I look. It's probably my outfit or my hair looks stupid, or they don't really like me. It's because I said that embarrassing thing in class and now no one's ever going to talk to me again. And those people over there are laughing. I bet they're laughing because of what I did earlier. And we start doing this thing where we get in our heads and we're imagining what we believe other people might be thinking about us. But the reality is, once again, it's not real. I don't actually know what anyone else is thinking. And so we refer to this form of predictive thinking as mind reading because it's as if we're pretending we have the ability to read someone's mind, and it's all this negative negative looped thinking. And then the third and the final one I'm going to throw at you today, we call jumping to conclusions, or maybe fortune telling. We do the same thing, similar to what if, except we do this thing where we say, oh man, I'm going to fail this test. Oh, I'm going to totally strike out when I step up to the plate. Oh, my boss called me into his office. Oh my gosh, he's going to fire me. We start to imagine as if we have the ability to predict what's going to come next, when the reality is we don't. And we do it in a very negative fashion. And all three forms that I've given you today, what if thinking, mind reading, fortune telling, these jumping to conclusions, these predictive thinking patterns, are not only imagined, they're not only very negative, they're just straight up not real. And so I'll leave you with this thought, since time has kind of run out on us today. I'll leave you with a simple thought. What if the next time that you notice yourself engaging in what if thinking, or mind reading, or fortune telling, jumping to conclusions, what if the next time you notice yourself doing that, you just stopped and said to yourself, that's not real. That's not real. That's not really what's happening. I don't actually have the ability to read minds. I don't actually have the ability to predict the future. I engage in that what if spiral, and I stop myself and say, whoa, hold on. That's not real. What if we just spoke truth to ourselves to help alleviate the stress, the anxiety, and the fear, and the worry that's conjuring up within us when we engage in these kinds of thinking? Well, as you can see, we're out of time. I hope that if something you heard today really strikes home, maybe you'll consider talking to a counselor, talk to a therapist, have a third party that can really help you walk through and start to correct some of these faulty thinking errors. Well, again, if something you heard was helpful, share it with a friend, share it with a family member. We want everything we share here to be educational and helpful and encouraging. In the meantime, we're going to come back next week and just look at some more examples of cognitive distortions and thinking errors. But in the meantime, I'm Andrew with 10 Minute Therapy. God bless.